Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Vanilla Weapons Expanded Tribal. For starters, you won't need any additional mods. How handy. Nothing too crazy to cover today, but a big notice up front that if you are playing with the Biotech DLC, this mod becomes considerably more impactful when factions like the Imp and Neanderthal tribes have access to the weapons that it'll add. So chances are, you're unlikely to use these weapons a lot yourself. You will, however, more frequently get donked on by enemies that turn up with them. So what do we have to play with? Nothing mind-blowing, just 7 new weapons that are all available to craft without needing any additional research. Obviously, as a player, you're going to get the most use from these weapons if you're doing a tribal start. For the majority of other scenarios, it'll just spice up the raids that you encounter a little. If you pair this mod with Vanilla Factions Expanded, Tribals, these additions are unlocked when you finish the weapons research in the basic tab. Let's go through these weapons anyway. 5 of the 7 are very consistent when used, as they do not have a quality modifier, meaning that even on a naked brutality start with a crafting skill of 1, you can rest easy knowing that most of these weapons will come out with the stats as shown. This mod, more than anything, goes a long way in showcasing just how important your material selection is. First up, you have 2 new directions for the club, either going heavy or light. Starting by covering the heavy club is kind of cheating, as it's far and away the most impactful weapon that this mod adds. Needing 70 material to make, it'll hit fairly slowly with some pretty big upsides. Firstly, it only has the handle or head to attack with, so it's pretty damn reliable for landing those big swings with the part of the weapon that you actually want to be used. Secondly, against other weapons on this tech level, its armor penetration is bonkers. Even industrial enemies are going to struggle to get high enough amounts of blunt armor to mitigate this, as it cracks through 31% if it's only made using steel, which, let's be honest, really isn't that hard to get a hold of. But if you're lucky and have some uranium or even a bit of jade, this thing becomes a monster with up to 46% penetration. Not only that, but a uranium club deals 11.39 damage per second, not counting for melee skill or any genes that are going to impact it. To put this into perspective, it deals more damage than a uranium warhammer, with higher penetration too. That being said, a warhammer can be impacted by quality, so that's comparing normal to normal. It still, however, takes a warhammer of masterwork quality to beat out a heavy club, so this thing is legitimately no slouch. It's why you'll learn to fear Neanderthal raids, as the 50% melee damage bonus can see a single blow from a heavy club, removing arms, legs, or straight up turning a pawn's chest inside out with one good hit. You see a Neanderthal with a heavy club made of anything above steel, you do what we do.
Run. You run your ass off.
Now I have to disappoint you with the light club, which is closer to one of those inflatable bats you find at a fun fair. It does have its uses though. It's less likely to maim or disfigure a pawn that you're trying to capture, so whilst you'll still be rolling the dice with the death on down chance, the pawn will most likely fall down from an overwhelming amount of bruises rather than using a heavy club, which can relocate someone's skull inside their own ribcage. Just consider how many pawns you're going to need to have using a light club to bring down a target in a viable time, as the last thing you want is a single fighter using this and getting the absolute crap beaten out of them whilst trying to bring down a target. You've got a dogpile if you're going to make use of light clubs. Next up, you've got the sharp tribal options. Let's go with the axe first. This can only be made from wood, stone, or jade, so you might find that it's quite quickly outclassed by other bladed weapons that can be made using steel. The axe falls to the wayside because it doesn't offer any bonuses to plank cutting speed, with pretty lackluster damage all around. The biggest risk from this weapon typically comes from other tribal factions, as a larger variety of melee arms means you're less likely to be simply bruised by tribals using clubs. Now you'll be facing the possibility of receiving some nasty cuts and the subsequent infections, as more enemies are turning up using weak but very messy sharp weaponry. Now we've got the Shiv, which is much more dangerous than I used to give it credit for. It does insanely reliable damage, only being able to cut or stab. No bashing with the hilt or handle nonsense here. and whilst its damage may be pretty low, its attack speed is lightning fast, verging on absurd if you make one out of plasteel. The Shiv is never going to bring down an armoured target, but you can treat it more like a risky version of a light club. It's not got the punch to destroy limbs or to butcher organs, but you're machine gunning puncture wounds into a target and making them bleed out at an astonishing rate. With this in mind, just remember how fast you'll need to get any potential prisoners patched back up, as dozens of small cuts that need tending can take hours for an unskilled doctor to fix.
Now stand back, I gotta practice my stabbing. No, please, help!
The last weapon that ignores quality is the firebombs. Only needing chem fuel to create, if you've got a couple of boomalopes tamed, you'll be sorted for making these. They work on a near identical stat to the Molotov cocktail, just a slightly worse direct hit chance, a worse miss radius, and a longer ranged cooldown. This is what can make imp tribal raids even more dangerous. They already don't give a crap about fighting in the middle of a firestorm, and they have clay pots full of incendiary, granting them even more destructive potential as they run around trying to torch everything. From the player side, it's quite nice to keep some firebombs on hand if you're dealing with insects on your map, as these can really help split up small groups that spawn on mountain biomes and allow you to take them down one at a time. On to weapons that are impacted by your crafting skill then. First up is the throwing shards. They're somewhat of a mix between the damage of a short bow and the flexibility of a peeler, in that they have both ranged and melee functionality. Material choice will only impact the stats of the weapon's melee damage though. Throwing shards give you a slightly easier option to chase runners, as you can stagger them with a well placed hit as they try to flee. It also allows your melee line to get in a little bit of damage before clashing with the enemy and being locked into combat. Is the melee damage that these weapons do viable though? Not really, as unlike the Shiv, it throws in the annoying chance to hit with the handle, and unlike the club, it isn't knocking enemies out of the park. These are weapons that you're more likely going to learn to deal with because of raiders using them, rather than having hands-on experience with them yourself. Finally then, we have the sling, and again, I'll compare it to a short bow. It does less damage, has worse range, lower armor penetration, it does fire slightly faster thanks to the lower cooldown time, but the main benefit of this weapon is that it's blunt damage. It'll ignore shield belts and be more likely to bring a target down in a quote unquote safe manner. What you're likely to find is that raiders using these weapons will almost bypass your early game armor entirely, as it's going to be hitting that very low value for blunt defense. So whilst what you're wearing may be lessening the impact from a few short bows or deflecting their arrows entirely if you have shields researched, you'll find that slings are always a thorn in your side. They're chipping away at your defenders if you aren't funneling your enemies into either a kill corridor so you can outrange them, or a kill box so they don't have anywhere safe to stand and fight. And that about wraps it up for the tribal weapons. I definitely find this to be a mod that leans more into helping the AI than helping the player, by giving them a more diverse toolset to use against you and stopping tribal raids becoming too predictable. They will always have a numbers advantage over the player, so the lackluster damage that some of these weapons do doesn't actually matter as much. The heavy club, on the other hand, might be something that you end up using almost entirely into the late game. The only thing that can outclass it is the EMP stun on a Zeus hammer. Thanks for watching folks. If you have any mods you'd like to see a full breakdown for, or suggestions of mods you'd like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon or evening. Take care.